welcome back to Cinematic Sarcastic, a podcast that talks all things movies and television. I'm Natalie, and I'm your host. On today's episode, we are going to talk about Firebrand. Now, this is a new drama movie that has come out. I believe it's on Netflix. This one is starring Jude Law and Alicia Vikander and sort of follows the journey of the tail end of Katherine Parr's marriage to Henry VIII. Now, of course, if you have been listening to me for any amount of time, you will know that I really love historical dramas or, period television series, period movies. I love the BBC. That's probably why, because they do a lot of historical dramas on the BBC, I feel like, and I enjoy those quite a lot. I do also very much enjoy movies, television shows involving Henry VIII. I find him a very fascinating creature. I feel like a lot of people do, and that's probably why they make a lot of film and TV about him, because I really like the psychological aspect of it. I feel like Henry VIII is probably really embodies that quote or that phrase, absolute power corrupts absolutely. It is always really kind of interested me that when you give someone absolute power and no one is allowed to say anything to them, that they really can do some really horrific things throughout their life. So when Firebrand kind of came up and people were talking about it, and this was going to supposedly sort of lean more into the story of Katherine Parr, I believe the director had mentioned that he had taken some inspiration from the book The Queen's Gambit. And so I was sort of really interested to see how that would turn out. So of course, the second that it was available to watch, I did sit down to take a look at it. This movie is 2 hours long. I really like Jude Law. I think he's a really great actor. I'm less familiar with Alicia Vikander, but I do know her. And so I was interested to see her portrayal of Katherine Parr. And I do know a bit, over the years, have just learned over the years a bit about Henry VIII and his different wives and sort of some of the things that had happened during that. And I really enjoyed it's been canceled now, but I really enjoyed the series Becoming Elizabeth, which also deals with Katherine Parr and her marriage after Henry VIII. She was married again. She was married 4 times overall in her life, but she was married again after the death of Henry VIII and had some, troubles with Elizabeth and her husband and that sort of thing. But this movie, I feel like, did not do well what many other pieces around Henry VIII have done. I found this to be incredibly slow, which for me, 2 hours is not that much of a big deal. I mean, I've sat through in the theater, movies that are 3 hours. I certainly love, the extended editions of Lord of the Rings, for instance. So I am not averse to sitting for really long films as long as the pacing of those films is decent. And so 2 hours, I was like, well, that's nothing, right? That's not a large amount of time. But Firebrand really feels longer. It is one of those movies that feels like you have been watching it for an extended amount of time, because there really isn't all that much happening in this story that is particularly interesting. And the only things that really kind of happen in this story that give it a bit of weight or a bit of meat are not true. This is by far, and should not be surprising to me, because I feel like there are a lot of liberties in historical accuracy when it comes to doing a lot of historical dramas and things of that nature. Real life can be exciting, but I feel like when you're transferring that onto a film or TV series, they do change facts or puff things up a bit to make it a lot more interesting. And this one, they definitely do that. They added, not for spoiler's sake, this might be spoilers for anyone who is going to watch Firebrand, but they add a miscarriage into the relationship between Katherine Parr and Henry VIII that never happened. They add sort of a murder attempt that also never happened. They add a lot of these sort of moments between Katherine Parr and what will be her future husband that probably never in real life happened. And I don't need for a historical drama necessarily to be historically accurate. I, very much loved the television series La Révolution that Netflix put out about the Revolutionary War in France. And that one was mostly just about zombies. And so I don't necessarily need that to be historically accurate. I just need it to be entertaining and interesting. And this one, even though it added a bunch to it that was not historically accurate, none of it, in my opinion, added to the entertainment value or the joy of watching the film. I think that there were a few moments in here that I definitely enjoyed between, Katherine and Henry's character, or between, Jude Law and Alicia Vikander in general, that really kind of kicked it up. I did enjoy the fact that Jude Law, I feel like, is probably the first actor to have played Henry VIII where he wasn't portrayed as like this smoldering, sexy, fit young man. Like Jude Law definitely plays Henry VIII towards the end of his life, so he does have that sort of festering leg wound at this point. He is heavier set. It was interesting to see Jude Law play sort of this disgusting version of Henry VIII, which I did very much enjoy. I think he did that very well, but overall the movie itself was not capturing my attention necessarily. And I feel like the fact that the movie was on the slower side or having a lot of issues with pacing then led to me picking out all of those moments that were not historically accurate the more and more that the movie went on. I don't know. This one was just not a win for me. I feel like it had all of the right bits and pieces. I think the acting in this was great. I think the set designs and like the costuming was glorious. I mean, they did an amazing job with costuming, but the story itself, like what they were telling, was not particularly compelling. There's so much here, or at least so much in Katherine Parr's real life, in her tiny amount of time that she spent with Henry VIII, and past that point, really, that they could have drawn on. I mean, I'm just thinking, I know that not a lot of people watched Becoming Elizabeth, and that one, again, may or may not be terribly historically accurate, because a lot of the things in that we don't have proof one way or another on if certain things happened. But I found that show 10 times more compelling than this film, and I really would have maybe liked to have seen some of the actors from this, I guess, in that show, and maybe pass the time between both of those moments, between the time that she was with Henry VIII and the time that she was with her new husband, and became a Seymour after she was with Henry VIII. Maybe that would have made it a little bit more exciting to sort of see that breakdown between her being a very pivotal point in Henry's relationship with his daughters and really being a good mother to them, and then sort of slowly losing that relationship over time after Henry's death. I think maybe that would have been a little bit more exciting. So I don't know. Overall, I feel like Firebrand was just a total miss for me. It was not something that I enjoyed and would not be something that I would watch again. But you guys are going to have to let me know what you thought of Firebrand if you have seen this one. Subscribe to join the Movie Nerd family, and I hope to see you in the next episode.